The city is going up in flames, but our guy is stuck in his own head, wondering how history is going to label him. Will he be remembered as the loyal knight who stayed by his emperor until the very end, or just an absolute idiot who chose the wrong side? And the funny part is, he doesn't like either outcome. This is Kane, a member of the Imperial Guard who served under an emperor that completely lost his mind and even made a contract with a demon, basically meaning our guy picked the worst possible leader. Cut to a man completely breaking down over Kane's body, yelling at him and calling him a fool. This is Hella Reston, the leader of the rebellion, and he's clearly not okay. He's crying, asking why Kane turned his blade at the last second, like, you could have just run away. Why didn't you? He grabs him, shaking him, shouting, open your eyes, damn it. But yeah, Kane's already gone. Nothing left. Completely lifeless. Now Kane finds himself walking through a strange afterlife that looks like a painting melted into reality. And he's like, so this is death? This is supposed to be freedom? Just wandering forever in something that looks like a screensaver? Kinda disappointing. Still, he admits it was nice that Hella cried for him. That part felt good. He figures he might as well accept this so-called freedom when suddenly a glowing blue orb flies straight at him and dives into his eye. Next thing he knows, he's opening his eyes again, and there's this old man who looks a lot like Hella, just way older and wrinkled, calling him Karen. The man asks the father if he wants to hold the baby, while everyone comments on how the child isn't even crying and how strong he seems. Meanwhile, Kane's mind is completely lagging, trying to understand what's going on. And then it clicks. This old man is Hella, just decades older. That's when baby Kane starts crying, because he realizes he's been reincarnated as his best friend's grandson. Hella thinks he somehow upset the baby, but nah, this is just a full-on existential breakdown happening in infant form. Fast forward, and now we're in a classroom where a professor is talking about the legendary knight Kane, who died 45 years ago alongside the emperor and is remembered as the ultimate symbol of loyalty. Sitting there listening is 10-year-old Karen, and he is absolutely not buying it. The professor suggests that Duke Hallow, Karen's grandfather, probably wanted to restore his friend's reputation since they were close. But Karen immediately shuts that idea down, saying he thinks his grandfather is holding on to resentment and deliberately turning his dead friend into a hero just to mess with his legacy. The professor just freezes, completely caught off guard. Karen explains that Hella can't accept that Kane probably wanted a quiet death instead of being turned into some legendary figure, but now he's being used as propaganda. Hearing this, the professor starts sweating because a 10-year-old just dropped a wildly controversial interpretation of history. He nervously says he's never considered that perspective before. Karen laughs it off, saying he was joking, but yeah, he's now living as Karen Reston, the third son of Count Pale, Hella's youngest child. And he's still annoyed that Hella turned him into a hero when that's the exact opposite of what he wanted. Speaking of his father, Pale is shown kneeling in prayer. He's incredibly kind but worried, since he never awakened magic and fears his son might inherit that limitation. Karen reassures him, placing a hand on his shoulder and calling him the best father ever, which makes Pale emotional as he hugs him and pinches his cheeks before asking what he wants to eat. Naturally, Karen says, meat. That night, Karen lies in bed thinking about the upcoming awakening ceremony. He remembers Hella explaining how not everyone awakens magic, and even if they do, it doesn't guarantee they'll become the family head. There's also a secret only the head knows. Back then, he asked if it was something like treasure or a magic book, pretending not to care but clearly curious. Hella said he'd tell him if he became head, but Karen replied he'd rather just live quietly somewhere far away. Except, he's already awakened. A blue aura quietly surrounds him as he thinks, "Don't worry, Dad. I've already got this handled." Turns out he awakened a long time ago and just never told anyone. The next day, the family heads to the capital, and Karen is super excited because it's his first time riding a train. His mother explains that the train system exists largely thanks to his father, praising him while smiling proudly. Even Karen is surprised, realizing that even without magic, Pale is impressive in other ways. He funded major projects and contributes heavily to the family's income. Still, Karen quickly forgets all that because he's too busy geeking out over the train ride. As they pass by the Reston family's main estate, the Azure Sea Fortress, Karen smirks. He's about to see his grandfather again, his former friend Hella, and the man who turned him into a legendary figure. But Karen already has a plan. He's going to become the complete opposite of what Hella built him up to be. He'll make sure all that effort was pointless and become someone totally unworthy of the family name. Honestly, after being turned into a glorified symbol against his will, it's hard to blame him. He quietly tells his old friend to wait, because his beloved grandson is on the way. When they arrive, a man named Heinrich greets them formally. Karen immediately notices the knights around him. They're far more capable than the ones back home. He figures it's only a matter of time before his secret is discovered, but he doesn't really care. Inside the palace, he's taken to a reception room while his father meets the elders. Looking around, he's impressed by how massive it is, even though it's just a waiting room. As he starts getting bored, another kid mocks him, calling him a bookworm and saying that since his father never awakened magic, his chances are low too. So he better focus on studying if he wants to survive like a commoner. He even insults Karen's haircut. Then the kid makes a huge mistake. He challenges him to a fight. Confident in his own magic, he says he'll teach Karen a lesson. But Karen simply glares and asks if the main family is raising delinquents now. As Karen releases his aura, the kid's confidence completely collapses. He stammers, asking when Karen awakens since no one mentioned it. Karen casually replies that even his own father doesn't know yet, and adds that there's no room for two troublemakers here. "I'll take that role," he says. "So step aside." And just like that, he decides it's time to beat him down. Cut to the elders' meeting, where they're discussing Karen's awakening. 3 captains have already confirmed it, and Raphael, the second son, is immediately suspicious, asking what Pale is planning. Pale, completely confused, responds that he didn't even know about it himself. Meanwhile, the eldest son, Tails, tells Raphael to relax with the conspiracy theories, pointing out that Pale never even awakened magic. That just makes Raphael scoff and call him pathetic, until suddenly, a man bursts into the room, urgently calling for Heinrich. Raphael storms off, following the butler. They arrive to find Leo completely wrecked, sprawled across a couch like he just got demolished in a brutal fight. Seeing his son in that state, Raphael completely loses it. He immediately grabs Karen by the collar, shouting about his behavior and demanding to know what he was thinking. Pale tries to step in, but Karen calmly explains that Leo insulted his father, and there was no way he was going to just stand there and take it. Raphael calls it nonsense, but before things escalate further, Pale grabs his shoulder and tells him to stop. Raphael snaps back, blaming Pale's parenting for Karen's actions, only for Heinrich to suddenly announce that the Duke himself will be making the decision. That instantly silences everyone. They all head toward Hella's study, with Raphael still fuming the entire way. Once inside, Hella asks why Karen caused such a scene the moment he arrived. Pale starts to explain, but Hella cuts him off, saying he wants to hear directly from Karen. However, he also adds that Pale raised him well, and there must be a reason behind his actions. Karen is a bit surprised at that, thinking that this kind of fairness doesn't really suit Hella. Still, he answers honestly, saying that Leo insulted his father. Raphael immediately calls him a liar, but Hella slams his desk and orders him to be quiet, demanding respect. Raphael backs down instantly, apologizing. Hella then says they'll bring Leo in to confirm the story, before turning back to Karen and mentioning there's something else he wants to ask. Without hesitation, Karen brings it up himself. "If you're asking about my magic," he says casually, "I awakened it 3 years ago." The entire room goes completely silent. Hella stares at him, clearly shocked, and asks why he would hide something like that, especially from his own father. Karen simply explains that at first, he didn't even realize what it was. He only figured it out later after reading about it in a book. And once he understood, he decided it would be more interesting to keep it hidden. Hella asks him why. Karen answers with a completely straight face, because it was fun. He even adds that it was especially entertaining since none of the knights in his territory noticed either, meaning he's basically been fooling everyone for 3 years straight. At that moment, the butler brings in Leo, who's practically wrapped up like a mummy. Hella asks him directly if he really insulted his uncle. Leo hesitates, clearly scared, but before he can answer, Karen suddenly puts on an act, saying that even if Leo mocked his father, he still shouldn't have responded with violence and admits he did wrong. That completely throws Leo off. As he remembers the overwhelming pressure from Karen's aura, he panics and quickly admits that everything Karen said is true. Hela nods and announces that punishment for both of them will be decided after the awakening ceremony the next day, then dismisses everyone. Later, when only Hela and Heinrich remain, Hela asks what he thinks about Karen. Heinrich says he's unsure, but there's definitely something unusual about him. Hela agrees, pointing out that not only did Karen awaken on his own and hide it for years, but he also subtly questioned the strength of the knights assigned to his father's territory, almost as if he was implying negligence. Heinrich suggests he might be overthinking it, but Hela shakes his head. I hope so, he says. But that child is different. He decides to observe him closely during the ceremony, since awakening magic alone doesn't reveal everything. What truly matters is what Karen gains from the ritual and whether he completes it safely. Hela is deeply curious. The scene then shifts to a secluded altar deep within a forest, clearly the site of the ceremony. Night falls, and Karen is escorted through the forest, surrounded by nearly the entire family. As he looks around, he's surprised. They really brought everyone, including retired elders who still seem strong enough to fight. Tails is there, along with his daughter Lean, Raphael, and Leo as well. The full lineup is present, making Karen realize this ceremony is far more important than he initially thought. Eventually, they arrive at the altar, where a mysterious stone rests. Karen immediately recognizes it, the Stone of Oath. Hela steps forward, his tone serious as he explains the process. Once Karen enters the rift created by the stone, he'll face a personalized nightmare, something unique to him. His goal is to obtain a weapon from that world and destroy it. Karen nods calmly, saying he understands. Hela raises an amulet, activating the ritual. The moment it connects with the stone, reality itself begins to distort. Space twists, and the air grows heavy with pressure, forcing everyone to brace themselves. Hela asks Karen if he's afraid, while Pale watches anxiously. But Karen just shrugs it off, saying he'll be back soon. After all, destroying things has always been his specialty. As he steps toward the rift, Hela calls out one last piece of advice, telling him to overcome his fear. Karen walks through the portal, and the moment he does, he finds himself back in his old body, as Cain, on the day of the revolution. Out of all the possibilities, it had to be this. Karen immediately clicks his tongue in annoyance, realizing the trial is forcing him to relive the worst moment of his life. It's dragging up the guilt he's been carrying, throwing the memories of his fallen comrades right in front of him. As he moves toward the throne room, a strange voice echoes around him, calling him a child of his bloodline and referencing an ancient pact tied to his ancestors. Karen frowns, wondering if it's some kind of demon. But the voice responds cryptically, saying his bloodline is too pure for something like that, and tells him to move forward. Pushing open the doors, he finally sees it. The throne. The very thing the Emperor was so obsessed with that he made a deal with a demon for it. Karen stands there, realizing that everything, every death, every sacrifice, traces back to what sits before him. And as he steps closer, it feels like he's walking over the bodies of his fallen comrades just to reach it. The voice keeps going on, talking about how Karen, blessed by the cold northern sea, has finally made it here. It welcomes him on behalf of the Blue Clan. Then Karen notices it. His old sword, the one he used back when he was Cain. The blade given to him by the Emperor. Ruin. And yeah, no surprise, it's a demonic weapon. The voice tells him to channel his mana into it, but Karen immediately shuts that idea down. Hard pass. That thing literally devours souls. The voice insists, explaining that his grandfather already purified it, and what he's seeing now is just a demonic illusion trying to intimidate him. Even so, Karen hesitates. Touching that sword means facing everything, every memory of blindly following the Emperor's commands. But then he recalls his grandfather's words about overcoming fear, and that's when it clicks. So that's the point of all this. This ceremony isn't just about getting a powerful weapon. It's basically therapy disguised as a trial. The heir has to confront their deepest fear head-on. Karen sighs and grabs the sword. Fine. If that's what this is, let's just get it over with. The moment he pours mana into it, everything shifts, and suddenly he's dropped into the depths of the ocean, floating in the darkness. He looks around. What is this? the Azure Sea. As he watches, the blade begins to change. The sinister, demonic appearance fades away, revealing something far more refined, pure. Karen realizes this isn't just any weapon. It's the original blade of his ancestor, Rael. His grandfather wields a progenitor's sword too, but this one is different, so powerful and so far removed from the family's current style that it was erased from history altogether. Then the sword goes wild. A massive surge of energy floods into Karen's body, nearly overwhelming him. He struggles to stay conscious, asking what the hell is happening. The voice calmly tells him to endure it, that the sword is imprinting its mana into him. Karen grits his teeth, thinking this is the most intense power-up he's ever experienced. Finally, he asks what the sword is actually called. The voice answers in a dramatic tone, explaining that this blade was created to kill demons and consume their power. It was so feared that demons themselves erased its existence from memory. Forged from the deep, pure waters of the Northern Sea. Its true name is Guillotine, the executioner's blade. Karen stares at it in silence. The voice continues, saying the weapon suits him perfectly, dark and deep, just like the ocean. Curious, Karen asks who, or what, the voice is, guessing it might be the blue dragon that protects their bloodline. But the voice refuses, saying he's not yet worthy to know its name. If he ever becomes strong enough to rule the seas, he can find it in the north. That leaves Karen slightly annoyed, but he's got more important concerns, like how to get out of here. The voice tells him he already knows the answer. Karen smirks, realizing what he has to do. Destroy the throne. He channels his mana into Guillotine and swings with everything he has. Back outside, the atmosphere is tense. Hela notices Pale looking nervous and tells him to relax. Pale apologizes, saying it's hard watching his son go through something he never experienced himself. Hela gives him a bit of advice about staying composed, and Pale manages a small smile. But then the Stone of Oath starts glowing again. Except this time something's wrong. Instead of stabilizing, it begins to crack. Hela's expression changes instantly as space itself starts warping again. The forest pulses with energy, and the altar begins to collapse. What is happening? He shouts. And then, through the chaos, Karen casually steps out, holding his new sword like nothing unusual just happened. Everyone stares. Karen looks around, trying to find the Stone of Oath, but it's gone. Because apparently, he didn't just pass the trial. He broke it. Now everyone is completely stunned, trying to process what just happened. Pale, on the verge of panic, starts yelling at him, asking what he did and why the stone is destroyed. Karen is just as confused, honestly having no idea what he just caused. Meanwhile, Hela is staring at the sword. His face goes pale as he whispers its name. Guillotine. Almost no one knows about that weapon. It was practically erased from history, like it never existed. Only the family head and a few elders know about it through oral tradition. He looks at Karen and asks if he's afraid of it, but then pauses, sensing something, muttering about an approaching covenant. Karen glances down at the blade and shrugs. Nope, I'm fine. Hela nods. Good. He then explains that long ago, their ancestors made a pact with a blue dragon to destroy all demons, but they failed. The Stone of Oath was left behind as proof of that attempt, passing the responsibility to future generations. And now, it seems Karen has inherited that burden. Hela raises his hand and formally declares Karen, son of Pale, a recognized member of the fortress, chosen by Guillotine and qualified to learn the Spirit Sea technique. Which sounds great, until you realize it basically means he's been drafted into an ancient war. Raphael, still bitter about his son getting wrecked, grumbles that he can't believe a kid like Karen is receiving this honor. Meanwhile, Tails is more curious about the sword itself. Pale comforts Karen, admitting he thought he knew every weapon in their family, but this one is completely unfamiliar and honestly unsettling. Still, he supports his son. Hela announces the ceremony is over. Time to head back. As they leave, Raphael starts arguing with Tails, asking if he's really just going to accept this. Tails calmly says they need to talk later, pointing out that even someone as ambitious as Raphael should understand how serious this situation is. When asked if he knew about the sword, Tails says no, it's his first time seeing it. Raphael is left completely shaken, questioning why Pale's son of all people was chosen. Pale tries to calm things down, saying this isn't the time for internal conflict. The next day, at the train station, Pale worries about leaving Karen behind at the fortress. Hinrich reassures him there's no safer place. Pale agrees, externally yes, but he's more concerned about threats within the family. Hinrich then reveals that Karen's instructor for the Spirit Sea technique will be Lady Sabina. Pale immediately relaxes, saying he hasn't seen his aunt in years. But if it's her, everything will be fine. Karen recognizes the name too. Hela's sister, once known as the White Wolf. Pale warns him not to be disrespectful, since she used to spoil him. Karen agrees. Hinrich adds that Pale will have a residence in the fortress so he can visit anytime, which makes Pale emotional as he thanks his father. After saying goodbye, Pale boards the train. Karen heads into the fortress with Hinrich, who warns him of one very important thing. Sabina hates being called grandmother. Karen thanks him, though internally he's confused about what's wrong with calling someone that. Inside, Hinrich explains that only direct descendants can enter the training chamber. Sabina is already inside, and so is Leo. Karen gets excited. Training with Leo should be fun. As he enters, Hinrich watches him go, thinking things are about to get interesting again. Standing outside, Karen can already feel the intense aura inside. Then a voice calls out, asking if he plans to stand there forever. He enters, bows, and freezes. Sabina looks way younger than expected. She doesn't look like a grandmother at all. She casually greets him, and Karen realizes she must have reconstructed her body using advanced magic, something only an 8-star knight could do. She snaps at him to stop standing around and sit next to Leo. She mentions she's surprised he knows her title, and Karen explains he read about her in books. She smiles, saying he's just as interesting as Hela described. When he asks what Hela said, she explains that he believes Karen is someone destined to navigate a vast ocean, and that she must help him reach the point where he can rule it. She stands and announces training will begin. Explaining the Spirit Sea technique, she says they create oceans within their bodies using mana. The more they can control, the stronger they become. 8 oceans equals the 8th star. Controlling all 8 as one, that's the 9th star. Only 3 people on the continent have reached that level. In the Empire, only 1. Karen immediately realizes it's his grandfather. And this time, he decides he'll reach that level too. Sabina senses his determination and smiles. Training begins. She tells him to let his mana flow through the pathways opened during the ritual, reminding him that the power of the sea isn't something you force into submission, it's something you accept. Karen focuses, saying it feels like violent waves crashing inside him, and that he needs to calm it down. He starts guiding the flow from his heart, slowly stabilizing it. And right away, there's a clear difference between him and Leo. Sabina notices it immediately. She wonders if this is really the mana of someone who just completed the awakening ritual. Even Leo, who has been training for 2 years with proper techniques, has only just begun reaching toward the 2nd star level. Meanwhile, Karen is already carving out his mana pathways on his own, without even being taught how. Karen suddenly winces, saying it feels like his body is being torn apart, and stops his training. Sabina observes carefully, noting that he's feeling the strain but still able to regulate himself. Then she glances over at Leo. And yeah, he's completely overdoing it. She immediately scolds him, reminding him not to force his mana flow. Leo apologizes, and she realizes she got too focused on Karen, forgetting that despite awakening their power, they're still just kids. She also can't help but wonder why Leo's hair still looks so messed up. That's exactly why she needs to act like the responsible adult here, to make sure they don't destroy their own bodies in the process. Watching Karen, she's impressed. He stopped at the right moment, avoiding damage, even while pushing himself. At such a young age, having that level of control despite his desire to grow stronger shows just how exceptional he is. She thinks to herself that her brother really left behind something remarkable, but at the same time, she realizes something else. She probably won't need to guide him like a lighthouse. Walking over, she calls out to him and tells him that for the next 3 years, she'll ensure his safety, but he needs to focus on gaining the strength to protect himself. Karen nods. Now it's time for practical training. They head out to the main training grounds, where other trainees are already practicing. Even one guy who looks like he belongs in a completely different genre is going at it. The instructor turns as Karen and Leo arrive. Leo looks at Karen and asks if he's really planning to train with that sword. Karen answers without hesitation. Of course. Apparently, people have been complaining that the sword's aura is too intense, so he's not even allowed to unsheath it. Leo shakes his head. That's not what he meant. The instructor steps forward and introduces himself. He explains that he'll be in charge of their sword training and that he's the commander of the Seawolf Knights, Zur Winterguard. Karen greets him respectfully, immediately recognizing that he's at the 8-star level just from his presence. Zur says up front that he won't be using titles like Young Master until they've proven themselves. Karen shrugs, saying that's fine. He actually prefers it, since he's not used to that kind of treatment anyway. He understands it's part of the family tradition to earn respect through skill. Zur raises an eyebrow, finding that response interesting. Most people would take offense. Leo, on the other hand, looks mildly annoyed, wondering why he's getting dragged into this comparison. Karen glances at him, laughs, and casually says it doesn't matter anyway. Eventually, everyone here will bow before him. Zur pauses, then comments that maybe a proper successor has finally appeared. But then he looks at Karen again, and notices the slightly unhinged expression on his face. Immediately, his opinion shifts. Now he's thinking that instead of a proper successor, someone even more troublesome than Leo might have just shown up. Time skip, 3 years later. Hela is relaxing, having drinks with his sister. She's praising his collection, saying his taste in alcohol is top tier. He clearly enjoys the compliment, but tells her to stop helping herself to his stash. Sabina brushes it off, saying it's the least he can do after she spent 3 years training those two. Hearing that, Hela gets a bit nostalgic and asks what she thinks about the boy after all this time. Sabina doesn't hesitate. She calls Karen a monster. Hela immediately reacts, asking what she means by that. But she doubles down, saying that calling him a genius would actually be underselling it. Hela turns to Zur, asking him to back him up. But Zur just shakes his head and goes, no, she's absolutely right. After observing Karen for the past 3 years, he says he agrees with everything Sabina just said. He starts breaking it down one by one. His physical capabilities, his raw talent, his mindset, the way he approaches training. Everything about him is abnormal. Then he drops the real bomb. Karen has already surpassed Hugo, the eldest grand heir, the one everyone believed to be the greatest prodigy in the entire family. Hela's brain practically freezes. Wait, you're saying he's on Hugo's level? The same Hugo who's considered the top talent in the entire empire. Zur nods calmly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Now Sabina's expression turns serious. She says this isn't just impressive, it's dangerous. If they don't handle things carefully, Karen's existence could cause serious problems within the family. Hela looks confused, so she explains. They need to think about what happens when news of Karen's talent spreads. Once his uncles realize their own sons are being overshadowed by their nephew, things won't stay peaceful. Hela tries to defend them, asking if she really thinks his sons would see their own nephew as a threat. Sabina doesn't even hesitate. Right now, maybe things are stable. But once Karen's abilities become widely known across the empire, tensions are guaranteed to rise. Hela slowly realizes she's right. Then Sabina's tone softens, and she asks if this might be the beginning of the end for their family. The Stone of Oath is gone, and on top of that, magical beasts are starting to pour in from beyond the Northern Sea. Looking at everything together, it doesn't look good. But Hela tells her not to worry. The one who destroyed the stone is destined to create a new one, just like their founding ancestor once did. Sabina pauses. Wait, that's the first time I've heard that. Is that some kind of hidden prophecy only the family head knows? Hela confirms it. The time of the covenant is approaching. Sabina sighs, realizing that their youngest is about to carry an unimaginable burden. She asks when he plans to tell Karen. Hela simply says he'll tell him when the time is right. Scene shift. Pale is reading a letter from Karen. It starts off normally, asking how his parents are doing, apologizing for not visiting because he's been completely occupied with training. He reminds his father to stay warm since winter is coming, knowing he gets cold easily. Then, very casually, he mentions that he's already mastered 4-star sea control and the 4th form of their swordsmanship. He adds that he's getting along well with the family and even looking after Leo. And then comes the real reason for the letter. He's out of money and needs more allowance. Back with Pale, He's laughing as he asks Hinrich if he remembers how anxious he was 3 years ago when he first left Karen at the fortress. Now the kid is thriving. Hinrich comments that the fortress hasn't been quiet since Karen arrived. Pale sighs, saying he keeps telling him not to stand out so much. Hinrich responds with a quiet observation. Something like a jewel will shine no matter how much you try to hide it. Then his tone turns serious. He warns that things are changing. They won't be able to keep Karen's abilities hidden for much longer. Soon, he'll likely be assigned a real mission. Pale frowns, knowing his older brothers won't be happy about Karen's rise. Hinrich reassures him. Sabina is extremely fond of Karen, and with her around, no one will dare try anything. Pale relaxes a bit, saying Karen mentions her in every letter, but it's good to hear confirmation. Hinrich adds that Sabina has always cared about Pale as well. Pale jokes that the monthly allowances she sends probably help. Then he grows concerned again, mentioning he heard Sabina might be leaving the fortress soon. Hinrich tells him not to worry. Karen has built strong relationships with the knights. They've even given him a nickname. Pale laughs, saying he's heard it. The young mad dog of the Azure Sea Fortress. Cut to a training match. Karen completely shatters another knight's sword mid-fight. The knight, Hans, calls it quits, asking how he managed to deflect his attack and take the hit at the same time. Karen bluntly tells him he's weak, that a grown man shouldn't be this easy to overpower, and that his muscles are just for show. Hans is stunned. No one has ever told him that before. But Karen doesn't sugarcoat anything. Hans admits that fighting Karen without using magic is becoming impossible, and it wasn't even this bad last year. He mentions that Karen might be assigned to a mission soon, possibly in the Western Granary region where magical beasts have been appearing more frequently. Karen immediately looks at Leo, asking if he heard that. Leo says he absolutely does not want to be deployed with him. The person Leo is sparring with tells him to focus. Leo apologizes, but admits that completing a mission might finally earn him recognition from his parents. Back to Pale and Hinrich. Pale reveals the real reason he called him. He shows him something confiscated from a merchant wagon in the Bellis territory. Hinrich examines it carefully. Is this what I think it is? Pale nods. Drugs. And he needs Hinrich to investigate the Bellis region. Scene shift. A man steps off a train, asking if this is the Azure Sea Fortress. Cut to Karen, currently stealing alcohol from Zer's stash without a single ounce of guilt. Just because he's in a kid's body doesn't mean he forgot what good liquor tastes like. And honestly, stealing from Zer never gets old. Then he notices two unfamiliar figures. One of them is asking a butler if it's true the Duke is away. The butler confirms he's in the capital, leaving the knight commander in charge. Karen calls out to them, startling the butler. He asks what brings them here so late. The man introduces himself as Baron Rohan of House Bellis, saying he has an urgent request. He starts going through a formal introduction, mentioning Karen's background, but Karen cuts him off and tells him to get to the point. The butler suggests reporting this to Zer, but Karen says if Rohan came in person, it must be serious. The butler leaves to inform Zer. Rohan is impressed by Karen's composure, but also very confused about why this kid is holding a bottle of alcohol. Karen quickly analyzes the situation. Bandits in the eastern mountains, drugs spreading, civilians being kidnapped and sold. Rohan confirms everything. He explains their territory is weak, with no real military left. His father led a desperate attack and got crushed, leaving him bedridden. He blames himself for everything. Karen sets the bottle down, saying people like that deserve to be wiped out, but something doesn't add up. Regular bandits shouldn't be able to defeat an army. Rohan says they suspect deserters from the Southern War might be involved. Karen thinks it through, makes sense, then casually offers him a drink. Right on cue, Zer walks in and catches him. He snatches the drink away, telling him alcohol isn't for kids. Karen complains. Zer apologizes to Rohan and assures him they'll handle the situation. Karen immediately says he wants to join. Zer shuts it down instantly. The situation is too dangerous. Karen argues that being overprotected won't help him grow. Zer refuses. Karen smirks. I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. Cut. Sabina appears. Zer realizes immediately he's been outplayed. Karen brought Sabina into this. With her involvement, Zer has no choice but to allow it. Rohan is shocked seeing a legendary figure like her. Still, he worries about bringing two kids. Sabina casually drops that she won't interfere unless their lives are in real danger. That terrifies both Leo and Rohan. Zur sighs but accepts it. The train is ready. Sabina encourages Leo, telling him this is his chance to prove himself. Leo gathers his courage. Karen mocks him a bit, and they board. Hours into the journey, Sabina explains she can't reveal herself publicly. If her presence is known, the enemy will scatter. Rohan still feels uneasy relying on two kids. Meanwhile, Leo reflects on everything: his inferiority, his rivalry, his frustration. But ultimately, he accepts it. Karen isn't his rival. He's his goal. Sabina snaps him out of it, reminding him how far he's come. She tells him to trust his training. He calls her master. She smiles. They're close to arrival. She pats his head and leaves early to avoid being seen, jumping off the moving train. Rohan watches in disbelief. And just like that, their first real mission begins. She completely ignores whatever Rohan was saying and casually tells him she'll be watching over the two of them anyway, so there's nothing for him to stress about. She even adds that if anything does happen, neither he nor his family will be held responsible. And then, without another word, she jumps straight off the moving train. Karen watches her go and lets out a laugh, saying she's just as bold as ever. Scene shift. An older man is coughing heavily. This is Rohan's father. He apologizes, saying his condition isn't great and hopes they'll forgive him for not properly welcoming the young members of the Reston family. Karen, already seated, waves it off casually, telling him not to worry about it and asking how his injuries are. The Baron explains that he's past the worst of it now and appreciates their concern. He adds that Karen might not remember, but they actually met about 10 years ago when he visited with his father. He comments on how well Karen has grown since then. Karen tells him to just speak normally, saying he's not very good with formal etiquette and it makes him uncomfortable. Rohan suggests at least addressing him as young lord, but Karen insists that being spoken to casually is easier for him. The Baron nods, then remarks that if Karen is already being sent on a mission at his age, he must have reached the 4th star level. Karen casually mentions that his cousin Leo is at 3 stars. Leo, standing there, can't help but wonder why he keeps getting dragged into this. Karen is a bit surprised that the Baron knows about their levels despite not being a warrior. The Baron explains that even if he isn't one himself, the fact that Karen was dispatched here means he's held in very high regard. Because of that, he hesitated to assign such a dangerous task to someone so young and promising. Karen nods, saying he understands the concern. But if they were to fail this mission, it would bring shame to the pride of the Blue Wolves, and that's not something they intend to allow. He turns to Leo and asks if he agrees. Leo nods, saying they'll complete the mission no matter what. The Baron lets out a small laugh and thanks them, but then starts coughing again. Rohan steps forward, asking if he's all right. Karen observes for a moment, then says he clearly needs rest, so they shouldn't keep him any longer. The Baron nods, saying he'll leave everything in their hands. He gestures to one of his men, saying preparations have already been made. They just need to follow him. As they're walking out, Leo calls out to him. Karen glances back and asks what's wrong. Already tired? Leo shakes his head and says that's not it. He just wants to know if they can really trust this herbalist. Even if the guy knows the terrain, there's no guarantee he's not secretly working with the bandits. Karen smirks and asks if Leo's finally started using his brain, then casually confirms that yeah, the guy is absolutely part of the enemy. Leo stops in his tracks. Wait, how do you know that? Karen explains it goes back to his conversation with Rohan at the station. When he asked how they planned to locate the bandits' hideout, Rohan admitted they had no choice but to rely on a traitor from within their own territory. Karen says it was actually a smart move. Leo still looks uneasy and asks why he didn't say anything earlier. Karen shrugs and says Leo was too busy being nervous the whole time. Leo thinks to himself that trusting a traitor on purpose is insane, but also realizes that Karen is way more calculating than he looks. Karen continues, saying the fact that the guy hasn't been punished yet proves he's useful. It also shows how desperate the situation is, which is exactly why they're being used as bait. Two noble heirs traveling through dangerous territory toward another domain? That's practically an invitation. Right on cue, the herbalist stops walking. He turns around, and sure enough, bandits step out from the trees behind him. He grins, saying this worked out nicely, and that they even got more than expected since the targets are nobles.
One bald bandit mutters that these young masters don't look like they'll come quietly. Karen doesn't wait. He draws his sword instantly and calls them insects, demanding to know how they dare spread drugs in his father's territory. Cut back to the Bellis estate. The Baron is still coughing badly. Rohan rushes over, worried, asking if he's all right. The old man insists he's fine, even though he clearly isn't. Rohan hands him water, which doesn't really fix anything, but the Baron thanks him anyway. Rohan then asks if those two kids will really be okay out there. The Baron leans back and explains that sending two young heirs into bandit territory with barely any intel isn't recklessness. It's a sign that those above trust them completely. He adds that Karen reminds him of the current Duke when he was younger. Not just in appearance, but in attitude. Calm, confident, and a little too fearless. In his opinion, they'll be just fine. Rohan nods, still worried, but choosing to trust that judgment. Cut back to the forest, and it's complete chaos. Karen is tearing through the bandits like it's nothing, cutting them down one after another. Leo is just standing there, watching this kid dismantle a group of grown men like it's routine, thinking, yeah, this guy is an absolute monster. Even the bandits are panicking. One of them turns to the leader, saying these aren't normal kids. They should retreat and warn the others. But the leader's pride won't allow it. He charges forward, shouting about how he won't be looked down on by some brat, jumping into the air and unleashing his aura. Karen doesn't even react. He swings his sword once, casually complaining about how loud the guy is, and splits him clean in half. The leader collapses, instantly defeated. Leo blinks, wondering when he was even supposed to step in. Meanwhile, Karen wipes the blood off his blade, annoyed that his clothes got stained. Leo quietly sheaths his sword, realizing that if Karen wanted to, he could have killed him before he even noticed. The remaining bandits immediately drop their weapons, shouting that they surrender. Karen grabs one of them and asks his name. The man stammers, saying it's Yura. Karen asks if he has rope. Yura nods. Karen tells him to bring it. Leo is completely confused. A moment later, both he and Karen have their hands tied. Leo looks at him like he's lost his mind. Do we really need to go this far? He understands the idea of playing along, but making the bandit carry their weapons too? Karen explains calmly, they're bait. It has to look real. Walking into a hideout fully armed would make no sense. This way, it's believable they were captured. Then he turns back to Yura and asks if they're deserters. Yura admits they were part of the 9th Regiment, 1st Battalion, 3rd Infantry Division of the Southern Kingdom. Leo mutters that they're from the war zone. Karen asks how many there are. Yura hesitates, then says, about 130 men, including a mage and 2 night-level fighters. Karen raises an eyebrow at the mention of a mage. Yura starts sweating, realizing he said too much. He thought these were just noble kids, but that blue aura earlier told him everything. These are members of House Reston, the core of the Empire. Karen, however, is focused on something else. Why would deserters travel all the way to the northern frontier? Yura explains that their commander promised them enough money to retire comfortably, so they all followed. But Karen isn't convinced. Why would an infantry commander have access to a high-level mage? Why are trained soldiers acting like bandits just for money? Something isn't adding up. Yura says they're almost at the base. Karen smiles slightly. Good. I'll see it myself. They arrive at the stronghold. The guards on the watchtower call down, questioning Yura. Did you really bring hostages? Where's the rest of the squad? Why are you alone carrying their weapons? Yura quickly spins a story, saying he handled these two himself, and that they're his catch. No one else is allowed to touch them. He adds that the others are chasing guards who escaped, and tells them to open the gate already. One of the men laughs, teasing him about finally getting lucky. One of the guys jokes that it took Yura long enough to finally earn some praise from the boss, while another laughs and tells him he's late, as usual. Yura snaps at them to shut up. Karen, watching all this, notes how strange it is. Despite joining a bandit group, Yura is way too soft for this kind of life. At the same time, he mentions he's been sensing something off this entire time, a strange presence. Yura starts sweating, his eyes locked on Karen's sword, muttering that he's been feeling something eerie ever since they got close. Karen nods slightly. If even his blade is reacting, then this situation might be worse than expected. Leo suddenly tells him to look ahead. They both notice it. birds nailed to wooden frames, strung up everywhere like offerings. Karen's expression hardens immediately. If they're putting up sacrifices like this, we're dealing with black magic. And just like that, what was supposed to be a simple bandit cleanup turns into something far more dangerous, a full-blown dark ritual situation. Karen realizes things are about to spiral and immediately orders Yura to cut their bindings and return their weapons. Right on cue, the magic circle beneath them starts glowing. Karen tells Leo to draw his sword, Sulfid, and prepare himself, because things are about to escalate fast. Leo barely gets the question out. What do you mean? Before skeletons begin clawing their way out of the ground. Yura completely loses it, screaming in terror as an entire undead force rises around them. From above, a voice echoes, laughing about how the hostages walked right into their trap, calling it a blessing from the gods. The leader of the group steps forward, surrounded by archers, greeting them mockingly as valuable little nobles. Karen scans the area quickly, noticing one thing missing, the black mage. He figures the guy's hiding somewhere, probably preparing more spells. Then, out of nowhere, Karen grabs Yura and holds his blade to his throat, asking the bandits if they're okay with him killing their own man. Yura freezes in terror. Leo is completely thrown off. Wait, how did we become the ones taking hostages? Aren't we supposed to have honor? The leader pauses, then asks how a noble can act like this when they're supposed to uphold honor above all else. Karen fires back immediately. Why can't we, when you do the same? Yura stands there, shaking. The leader scoffs, saying Karen's amusing, but wrong. A useless hostage has no value, and Yura means nothing to them. Karen clicks his tongue, calling Yura worthless right to his face, which nearly makes the guy cry. Leo quickly analyzes the situation. They're massively outnumbered, and asks Karen if he actually has a plan. Karen answers calmly, "Of course, we just take down the commander." Then, he releases his aura. The commander sees the color, and his expression changes instantly. There's no way. Karen tells Leo he'll handle the commander himself, leaving all the skeletons to him. Leo is stunned. Wait, what? But Karen is already moving. Azure mana bursts out from his body, swirling like ocean waves as he launches forward. Leo calls out to him, but a skeleton lunges at him, forcing him to block. Karen, are you insane? How am I supposed to deal with all of these alone? Behind him, the commander orders the archers to fire. But Karen closes the distance too fast. Too slow. Using the flowing techniques of the fortress sword style, his movements ripple like water as he swings. And in a single motion, multiple archers lose their arms. The commander reaches for his weapon, but Karen cuts him off mid-action. This is getting annoying. One clean strike, and the commander's hand drops to the ground. He collapses, screaming in agony. Karen looks down at him, unimpressed. If you were going to fight, you should have been faster. Through the pain, the commander snarls, demanding to know why someone from the fortress would even bother coming here when they shouldn't have resources to spare. Karen answers simply, "This land borders my father's territory." That's enough reason. He adds that he's not going to kill him. Just drag him back to the fortress. Meanwhile, Leo is in the middle of absolute chaos, fighting off waves of skeletons like he's in a war zone. Karen glances over. Not bad. Even though Leo is clearly struggling to keep up, the archers still have their bows raised, but no one dares shoot after witnessing what just happened. Karen tells Leo that while his current technique works for the Sea Wave style, he should rely more on raw power instead of finesse against enemies like this. The commander, still in pain, asks if Karen really believes he's leaving alive. Karen asks his name. Michael Knox. Karen nods slightly. "I'm not killing you," then immediately stabs him in the knee. Michael screams again. Karen laughs lightly, telling him to order his men to drop their weapons. Michael shouts the command, and the archers obey, dropping everything. Karen smiles. Good. I like obedient people. Michael, humiliated, mutters that once their reinforcements arrive, even someone from House Reston won't be able to handle it. Karen tilts his head. Still hoping, huh? He asks if Michael is counting on the Black Mage, and whether he really thinks the family would send just 2 kids to handle something like this. Right then, Leo finishes off the remaining skeletons, and suddenly, a massive explosion shakes the area. Karen sighs. Of course, they brought a guardian knight. He clicks his tongue, realizing that while he was busy here, His master has already taken care of the real threat. Cut to Sabina walking in, calm, unbothered, holding the severed head of the black mage. And she looks furious. Leo calls out to her. She immediately starts scolding both of them, saying they overlooked the most important evidence and may have compromised the mission because of it. Karen casually kicks Michael off the platform, sending him tumbling down, then asks if she at least liked his approach. Sabina crosses her arms, charging straight into the enemy base. That's exactly the kind of reckless move her brother would make. She admits it fits their family style, and gives him credit for that. Then, without hesitation, she flings the black mage's severed head toward them. Michael stares down in sheer horror at what used to be his companion. She questions why Khan even resorted to taking hostages in the first place. He explains that they wanted to attack from an unexpected angle. No one would suspect nobles of pulling something like that. She admits he has a point, saying she's never encountered a noble like him before. He's completely unhinged. Karam takes it as praise, thanking her. Meanwhile, Michael just sits there, bleeding out, eyes locked on his friend's head, silently questioning whether these people are truly nobles at all. She then says they should return to Lord Bella's castle since she has several things she wants to ask Karen. He agrees. Michael glances one last time at the corpse and thinks to himself, these people are completely insane. The scene transitions to a much warmer moment as the freed captives reunite with their families. A man rushes in frantically, calling out for his daughter Isabel, and she collapses into his embrace. He apologizes again and again, overcome with emotion for failing to protect her. Nearby, Karen and Yura watch the scene unfold. Yura can't take his eyes off it, guilt written all over his face. Karen notices and asks if he's starting to feel remorse. Yura quietly admits that he is. Karen responds bluntly, saying it's too early for regret. Ending up in the Baron's prison like the others might have actually been the better outcome for him. Confused, Yura asks what he means. Karen explains that Yura will be heading to the fortress along with his boss, Michael, who's still lying there missing a hand. Yura questions why he's included. Even Sabina asks if they really aren't going to restrain him. Karen explains they need someone to help move Michael since he's in no condition to walk. Still, he warns Yura not to get too comfortable.
At that moment, some of the freed prisoners speak up, asking if Yura will also be punished. Karen confirms that, technically, he's still a bandit like the rest. However, one of the men steps forward and says that although it may be bold to speak, Yura actually treated them kindly while they were imprisoned. He secretly provided medicine to the sick and shared food with those who were starving. Because of that, they're asking for leniency. Sabina turns to Karen for his opinion. He says they should at least take it into consideration since Yura also helped guide them to the hideout. Yura becomes overjoyed, immediately pledging lifelong loyalty to Karen. Karen quickly shuts that down, reminding him not to lower his guard. Just then, Leo calls out, saying he's found something worth seeing. They open a barrel, and Karen's eyes widen as he asks if it's what he thinks it is. Inside are magic stones. Meanwhile, the townspeople are celebrating, watching as the captured bandits are escorted away. Leo comments that Rohan will probably host a grand feast to celebrate. He cheerfully waves at the citizens, but Karen remains silent, clearly deep in thought. Leo asks if he's being ignored. Karen explains that everything makes sense now. There was a reason such a large group chose to hide in such a remote mountain region. The Baron's family likely had no idea there was a magic stone mine within their own land. He's unsure of its quality, but even so, a mine like that could generate enormous profit. Leo internally panics, wondering what kind of scheme Karen is cooking up now. Sabina mentions that Rohan has arrived to greet them. Rohan welcomes them as the others begin escorting prisoners to the dungeon. Sabina says she'll handle the bandit leader and asks if that's acceptable. Rohan agrees, but says he has a request. She responds that she's only acting as a guardian here, so he should speak directly with her students. Rohan explains that a modest banquet has been prepared and invites them to eat and talk. Karen immediately apologizes, saying they need to return to the fortress as soon as possible. Leo looks crushed. He was clearly hoping for that free meal. Rohan then brings up the payment for the mission, explaining that their territory lacks the funds to pay the fortress and asking for a delay. Karen's eyes gleam with interest, and Leo immediately senses trouble. Karen says he was wondering why the bandits would settle in such a barren place, and now he understands. Rohan, confused, asks what he means. Karen explains that Bella's territory is remote and lacks any notable resources. It's essentially just a rural backwater. Rohan struggles to hide his irritation, but Karen continues, saying the bandits were after something else entirely. He reveals a magic stone, shocking Rohan. Karen asks if he was aware of their existence. Rohan denies it completely, saying he had no idea there was a mine nearby. Karen then proposes a deal. Rohan asks what kind. Karen suggests a joint development of the mine with the fortress, on the condition that the fortress provides the initial funding and security. Rohan's mind races. Even without considering development costs, simply storing the stones and maintaining guards would be incredibly expensive. However, having the prestigious Rest family involved could be a major advantage. He starts thinking it might be worth it, but at the same time wonders how this kid even thinks he can negotiate something of this scale. Karen adds that he'll need to report the matter to his father, but if it goes through, stationing fortress knights there could boost the region's economy and solve its defense issues at the same time. A perfect win-win. Rohan asks what share the Duke's house would want. Karen replies that such details would need to be discussed with his father, as he himself isn't qualified to finalize them. Meanwhile, Sabina watches proudly as her young student successfully initiates a business deal at just 13. On the way back, Karen asks Sabina something that's been bothering him. He questions why she said things at the bandit hideout that could have complicated the situation. She brings up the Black Mage. Karen asks if it's because he was just an ordinary opponent. She reveals his name, Ted Delarda, a Class 2 wanted criminal in the Empire and a Sixth Circle Dark Mage. Karen is completely caught off guard. She explains that he was a high-level fugitive operating within Imperial territory, alongside deserters from the Southern Kingdom. Meanwhile, Karen and Leo were too focused on minor enemies to notice the real threat. She emphasizes that growth comes from facing stronger opponents. If Karen had prioritized defeating the Black Mage, he wouldn't have wasted time. Because of that, she considers the mission a failure and tells him to remember that lesson. Leo, standing nearby, wonders why he feels completely left out of the conversation. Sabina then turns to him and says he actually performed better than expected. Since it was likely his first time facing undead enemies, he should be proud. Leo brightens up immediately. Then she adds that he needs more confidence, and maybe a new haircut once they return to the fortress. Back at the fortress, Heinrich welcomes the Lord, noting his return. Halo asks if anything unusual occurred. Heinrich reports that the knights sent west have come back, and that Karen and Leo have also returned with Sabina. Suddenly, a butler rushes in, shouting urgently. Halo asks what's wrong. The butler says a letter has arrived from the Imperial Palace. Confused, Halo notes that the Emperor hadn't mentioned anything before leaving the capital. He reads the letter and is completely stunned. The Emperor has personally summoned Karen to the capital. Soon after, the train arrives at Chonghai. Yura steps off, carrying Michael over his shoulder like a sack. He drops him, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the fortress. It's far larger than he ever imagined. Michael, still bitter about losing his hand, warns Yura not to believe anything that Brat said. According to him, they'll both be thrown into prison at any moment, and if they want to survive, they should run the first chance they get. Yura responds by punching him, telling him to shut up already. Leo and Karen watch the exchange, clearly entertained. Yura snaps back, reminding Michael that he was the one who called him useless and told him to die. So why would he help him escape now? Just then, Pale arrives, bringing his usual chaotic energy. Karen lights up at the sight of his father. Pale asks Sabina how things went, and she says it was manageable, mentioning that he was summoned as well. Pale confirms it, saying it's probably because of whatever Karen pulled off in Baron Bella's territory, calling it a massive headache, though he also notes Karen looks quite pleased with himself. Leo gives a formal bow, politely asking how he's been. Pale responds that he's heard Leo performed impressively during the mission, and word of it has already spread. His older brother has likely heard as well and will be happy about it. Pale then suggests they head inside to rest, noting they must all be exhausted. As they walk forward, the group begins to move deeper into the fortress together. Sabina asks if he has any idea what's happening within the Empire lately, because everything feels off. Pale starts sharing what he's heard. Those so-called influential families, aside from theirs, have all started aligning with each other. They're gathering under Duke Salmon and Maris Diaz. Halo had originally planned to meet several noble houses in the capital to figure out what was going on, but after his discussion with the Emperor led nowhere, he called the whole thing off. Pale explains that Duke Salmon and Maris Diaz were the ones who overthrew the former emperor and placed the current one on the throne, meaning they're the ones who truly hold power now. Sabina's brother had distanced himself from central authority after the empire was reorganized, believing it was the best path forward for everyone, and now this is how they're being treated. Sabina remarks that it seems like the era of peace is coming to an end. Pale agrees, saying whether they like it or not, their family will have to take action. Sabina then points out that what his son accomplished might actually benefit them. Now they have a legitimate reason to station troops on their lands and expand their influence. She adds that his son is quite impressive for managing to pull off something so advantageous at just the right moment. Pale gets flustered by the comment, thanking her awkwardly, only for Sabina to clarify that she wasn't complimenting him. Meanwhile, Karen and the others return, and Zur greets them, saying he's heard about the deserter situation. Karen gestures toward Michael, identifying him as the leader, and Zur says he'll interrogate him while he's still alive. Hans asks about the man carrying the bandit, and Karen replies that he's a bandit as well and should be taken along. Yura immediately starts to panic, but Karen steps in and explains that Yura is acting as an informant, telling them to go easy on him and release him later since he plans to keep him as a personal servant. Karen then says he's heading off to rest, but Zur immediately shuts that down, reminding him that the mission isn't finished yet. He still needs to submit a report to review the operation and improve future missions. Karen asks if they need to write separate reports, and Zur says they can do it together. Karen's eyes light up. Perfect. Since he did most of the work, Leo can handle the paperwork. Leo argues it would be faster if they worked on it together, but Karen tells him to think carefully. Once it's submitted, his father will read it too, meaning Leo should highlight his own achievements as much as possible. This is his chance to earn recognition. Leo agrees, though he worries that putting his name in too often might backfire. Zur starts getting annoyed and tells Hans to just take the prisoners already. Then Sabina casually tosses the Dark Mage's severed head to Zur, saying the boys can submit the report under their names. With that, she and Karen walk off, leaving Leo stuck with all the paperwork. Leo calls out, asking where Karen is going, and Karen replies that he's heading to the training hall since he's reached the 4th star and can now train there alone. Zur watches him leave, thinking that if the kid is heading straight to train immediately after returning, it's hard to believe he's only 13. There's clearly something different about him. Later that night, Halo gathers everyone, saying he has something important to discuss. Zur mentions he's brought what was requested. Halo reveals a piece of hide taken from a monster that appeared in the Western Ferment Plains. At first glance, it looks ordinary, but the dark energy within it isn't normal. It's the black ether of the evil emperor. His sons are visibly shaken. Pale points out that the evil emperor has been dead for ages, so how could his power still exist within monsters? Halo interrupts, saying there are only 2 possibilities. Either remnants of the emperors will still linger, or the evil emperor is somehow still alive. Either way, it must be connected to the strange developments within the empire. He also mentions that news from Bella's territory has already reached the emperor, who has personally summoned Karen to the capital. Raphael looks displeased, while Pale is left stunned. Halo says he won't send Karen alone. Leo and a group of knights will accompany him. However, he plans to hear Karen's opinion first, and if he refuses, he won't force him. Tails questions whether that might cause issues, but Halo dismisses the concern, saying Karen is still just a child. More importantly, he wants to understand why Karen made that deal with Bella's son in the first place. He orders them to bring Karen in immediately. At that moment, Karen is in the training hall, completely unaware that he's about to be summoned for a family meeting to explain his unauthorized business decisions. Mid-training, he notices Zur and asks when he arrived. Zur replies that it wasn't long ago. Karen mentions that aside from direct family members, Zur is the only one allowed into the training hall, yet he's never actually seen him enter before. He asks what the emergency is. Zur gets straight to the point. Karen will likely be heading to the capital. The head of the family wants him at the council meeting, and he'll hear the full details there. As they arrive, The butler opens the door, and Halo asks if Karen enjoyed his first mission. Karen replies that he did. Halo immediately shifts to the main issue, what happened in the barren lands. Karen didn't have the authority to make business deals on behalf of the family. So why did he act on his own? Karen internally realizes this isn't praise, it's a lecture. Halo asks if it ever occurred to him that his actions could be seen as disrespectful toward the Bellis family. Karen calmly responds that he simply made an agreement with Bella's son, who accepted it willingly. Besides, he believed something more important than noble etiquette was at stake. Halo asks what could possibly matter more than courtesy to a noble. Karen thinks for a moment before answering, the family's honor. Halo seems pleased with that response. Considering how valuable the deal is, Karen could have claimed all the credit for himself, but instead he prioritized the family's benefit and stepped back. That shows good judgment. The fact that he's not being punished for making an unauthorized deal is just an added bonus. His uncles watch him closely, clearly analyzing his every move. Halo concludes that the deal Karen brought back benefits the family greatly, and Pale can handle the remaining negotiations. After all, there's nothing wrong with a father profiting from his son's efforts. Pale states that he'll head to the barren lands at dawn. Then Halo brings up the Emperor's letter again. The Emperor has summoned Karen to the capital, as news of him has already spread there. Karen recalls that, according to Zur, the letter arrived even before Halo returned, making him wonder just how efficient the Emperor's intelligence network is. Then it clicks. The current Emperor is merely a figurehead. It must be the powerful nobles behind him gathering information. An awkward silence fills the room, and Halo tells Karen that if he doesn't want to go, he doesn't have to. He's likely already realized what going to the capital would mean. The noble houses there will want to evaluate him, and staying out of the spotlight might be the smarter choice. Zur looks at Halo, puzzled as to why he's even giving Karen a choice. Karen answers without hesitation, of course he'll go. It's also been a long time since he's seen his grandfather on his mother's side. However, he asks if he'll be going alone, pointing out that Leo was part of the mission as well. Halo replies that if Karen goes, Leo will accompany him, along with Han's squad for protection. Karen questions why that's necessary if his grandfather is there. Halo immediately shuts him down, telling him not to get ahead of himself. They're not assigning guards because he's important, but because no one knows what kind of trouble he might cause next. Later, back in Bellis territory, the negotiations are being finalized. Pale thanks them for their efforts and asks Rohan if his father has agreed to the terms. Rohan confirms that he has. The mine's shares will be divided 80% to Resstun and 20% to the Bellis barony. Since magic crystals are incredibly profitable, even a small percentage is significant. However, allocating 5% out of that 20% specifically to Karen and Leo is an unusual condition, and not particularly favorable for the Bellis family. While the two did accomplish their mission, granting them such a large commission is extremely generous, especially for a top Imperial Academy graduate to approve. Rohan explains that it's an investment. He wants to build goodwill with them while they're still young. Pale calls him out for not even trying to hide his intentions. Rohan continues, saying he's betting on the two of them as future leaders of the fortress. Pale admits it's a bold and shameless move, but he respects it. Baron Bellis is fortunate to have such a capable son. Rohan laughs it off, saying he's nowhere near as brilliant as Pale. Finally, Rohan turns to the boys, saying it's time to hear their thoughts. Karen, practically seeing profit in his eyes. Meanwhile, Leo just watches him, wondering why he's grinning like a madman again, because deep down, Karen is just thrilled about the money. Back at the station, Leo turns to Karen and says he's got something on his mind. How exactly are they dividing the shares they earned? Karen answers casually, saying he'll naturally take 9, leaving Leo with 1. Leo blinks, clearly surprised, asking if he's seriously taking that much. Karen looks confused as to why that's shocking. Leo argues that they've been getting along pretty well lately, so hearing that feels a bit off. Still, he doesn't even bother pushing the issue and just accepts it. Karen tells him to keep that same energy if he ever decides to complain later. Pale watches the exchange, commenting that when they were younger, the two of them fought non-stop, but now they've become inseparable. Honestly, that man is seeing things that aren't there. Karen just finessed Leo out of 90% of the shares. These two aren't inseparable. One's a calculating strategist, and the other keeps falling for it every time. The scene shifts to the brothers talking, and Leo is completely losing it. He's freaking out, saying he can't believe they're actually heading to the capital. He's only ever heard rumors about the place and has no clue what to expect. Karen stands there unfazed, telling him to calm down. But Leo refuses, pointing out they're about to meet the Emperor himself, so panicking is completely justified. Then his mood flips instantly, and he starts getting excited, talking about noble parties and how the capital is supposedly filled with beautiful women. Karen just sighs, clearly done with him. Out of nowhere, Sabina shows up, full of energy, saying the capital, Dacis, is an incredible place, crowded, lively, and packed with insanely strong people. Leo looks confused, asking what she's even doing there. She casually says she came to celebrate their first mission and asks where the wine glasses are. Karen gives her the most unimpressed look possible and asks why she'd expect to find wine glasses in a 13-year-old's room. Without missing a beat, she shrugs and says as long as it holds wine, any cup works. She hands them random cups and asks Leo if he's ever had alcohol before. Leo admits he's only had a few sips because of Karen. Sabina sighs, calling Karen out for dragging his younger brother into his wine-stealing antics. But Leo just shrugs it off, saying if they're getting in trouble, they might as well do it together. Sabina pours him a drink and tells him not to hesitate since she's the one serving it. Then she gets a little sentimental, saying both of them have grown up well. Karen thanks her, and she continues, mentioning it's already been 3 years since she promised to train him. She admits she's a bit disappointed she won't get to witness the chaos he's about to stir up in the capital. Leo mentions he heard she's heading back to the North Sea soon, and suddenly he gets emotional, asking if they'll never meet again. Sabina immediately roasts him, saying with that level of sensitivity, there's no way he'll survive socializing with women at capital parties. Leo turns red, embarrassed, and she adds another warning. If he does attend parties, he should probably avoid going with Karen. Confused, Leo asks why. She explains that with Karen's looks, talent, and smooth way of speaking, it's obvious what will happen. It hits Leo instantly. His brother is going to steal all the attention. He puts a hand on Karen's shoulder, joking that he's ruining his future chances at marriage. Karen tells him to stop talking nonsense and just drink. Meanwhile, we cut to Halo, who's also drinking, because apparently that runs in the family. There's a knock at the door. It's Pale. Halo tells him to come in, and Pale asks if he called for him. Halo confirms and brings up the Bellis negotiations, saying he heard they wrapped things up and even agreed to give part of their share to the boys, which is pretty surprising. Pale explains that the young Baron's opinion carried a lot of weight, and Bellis framed it as an investment for the future. Halo nods, impressed, saying the Baron's son is sharp and that having strong allies is always beneficial. He tells Pale he's leaving the Bellis matter entirely in his hands, and Pale agrees to handle it. Halo pours him a drink. Pale thanks him, but his expression turns serious. He says Halo doesn't give praise without reason, so there must be something else going on, probably related to Karen's trip to the capital. Halo confirms it, pointing out that emperors rarely summon anyone directly, aside from himself, so Karen being called is highly unusual. Pale says he figured as much. Halo continues, explaining that during his private meeting, he noticed the same fear in the Emperor's eyes, the kind of fear that comes from knowing Halo overthrew the previous tyrant and worrying he might do it again. That's why he suspects other political forces are at play. Pale asks if he thinks it's all political maneuvering, and Halo says without a doubt. Pale points out that with so many powerful families gathering in the capital, Halo could have simply declined the Emperor's request, but he didn't. He asks why. Halo smiles and says he wants to see what Karen is truly capable of. Pale is caught off guard. Halo explains that Karen was chosen by the ancestral blade, meaning whether he likes it or not, he's destined to stand at the center of their family. As a member of House Reston, he'll constantly face pressure and threats. That's exactly why Halo didn't refuse. If Karen is going to carry the family's future, he needs to prove he can handle it. He asks Pale if he's worried about his son. Pale immediately starts drinking so fast he chokes, coughing everywhere. Halo laughs, and Pale admits honestly that he trusts his son. Halo looks at him with pride, saying that's exactly what he wanted to hear. The next morning, Sabina has her horse ready to leave. Zer asks if she's really not going to say goodbye to the boys, and she replies that she already shared drinks with them last night, so that's enough. Zur complains about everyone stealing his liquor. Sabina adds that the boys will be busy heading to the capital today anyway, so it's better for her to leave quietly. She says she's looking forward to seeing them again. Zur says he'll keep the wine stocked until then. Just before leaving, she glances up at Karen's window, where he bows to her. She smiles, saying they'll meet again. She heads back to the North Sea, her home, reminding Karen he's always welcome to visit, and that she'll be waiting with good wine. Karen reflects that she really left with nothing but a letter. Now that she's gone, even his uncles might start making moves. Right on cue, Tails appears, mentioning their aunt has left. Karen just mutters, "Perfect timing." A few days later, the boys are ready to depart. At the train station, Henrik is busy making sure everything is in order, asking if all the luggage has been loaded. Everyone confirms, while others fuss over their outfits. Karen gets irritated and asks Zur why they're making such a big deal out of this. Zur reminds him they're about to meet the Emperor as representatives of the entire family, so appearances matter. Karen accepts that, but then questions why Hans' entire squad is tagging along. Zur says it's for protection, but Hans calls him out, saying it's more because they're worried Karen will cause trouble. Karen complains that with so many people around, this trip is going to be exhausting. We get a flashback to when Tails approached him earlier. After greeting him, Tails asked if he was heading to the capital. Karen confirmed. Tails then said he had a favor. He hopes Karen won't act in the capital the same way he does at the fortress. Karen immediately realizes what he means and sarcastically notes that it sounds like he's been spying on him. Tails doesn't deny it, saying the capital is full of enemies who want to bring their family down. If Karen gives them even the slightest excuse, he'll personally deal with him. Karen thanks him mockingly, saying he'll be sure to live up to expectations. Tails tells him to return safely before leaving. Karen watches him go, smirking to himself, thinking that if Tails believes he can suppress him just because he's the first prince, he's mistaken. He's already planning to make that arrogant expression disappear someday. Back in the present, preparations are complete. Karen warns Hans not to cause trouble. Just then, the large man from earlier arrives late, apologizing and thanking Karen for giving him another chance. Karen bluntly says he only brought him along to throw him in prison later and tells him not to get comfortable. An announcement calls for boarding, and Hans tells Zur they're leaving. Zur reminds them not to cause trouble in the capital. Karen jokes that anyone watching would think they're a group of delinquents. Zur gives a cryptic remark about a cracked bowl leaking both inside and out, then tells them it's time to go. Just before boarding, Pale rushes in, saying he barely made it. Karen is surprised to see him. Pale explains he was called there by Karen's grandfather, but wanted to see his son one last time before he left. He mentions that Karen's maternal grandfather is looking forward to his arrival. Karen smiles, saying he can't wait to see him and is sure he's prepared plenty of gifts. Pale places a hand on his shoulder, telling him to return safely and not cause too much trouble. The scene shifts to Tails' room, where he receives a report that Karen and Leo have left. The messenger also mentions that the second prince's wife is plotting something in the capital, but Tails dismisses it as none of his concern. The train finally departs, and Karen remarks that it took long enough. He asks Hans how long the journey will take. Hans says around 6 hours and mentions they'll pass through the TB autonomous territory. Karen asks about it, and Leo eagerly explains that it's a unique city where commoners elect their own mayor, and commerce and industry thrive more than agriculture. Karen asks if it's the place where most of the empire's wealth circulates. Hans confirms, adding that wealth equals influence, which gives the territory significant power, though it also draws resentment from other nobles. Karen recalls that some serfs flee oppressive lords and seek refuge there. Hans confirms they're on good terms with the fortress and occasionally request assistance from their knights. Karen finds it interesting and says he'd like to visit someday. As the train approaches the territory, Karen is already thinking about sneaking away after their official duties. Leo says he wants to come too. Suddenly, Leo senses something. His sword reacts. His expression changes instantly. Whenever it reacts like that, it means danger is nearby. He starts considering possibilities. Could Tails or Raphael have planted someone among them? No, that seems unlikely. Then it clicks. He urgently tells Hans to contact the territory immediately. Hans is confused, but Karen insists there's no time. They need to warn them about an incoming attack. Hans begins sending messages while Karen wonders how anyone would attack a moving train. Then the answer appears, explosives lined along the tracks. Back in the TB territory, chaos is already unfolding. Officials are panicking as a tax investigation tears through their operations. One man even admits to money laundering, causing everyone to turn on each other. They demand the mayor say something, but he's having an existential crisis, regretting ever taking the job. He thought the territory would be a place of opportunity, but instead it's constant conflict between classes. Suddenly, a man rushes in, whispers something to the mayor, and leaves. When asked what's going on, the mayor casually says it's nothing minor. He lights a match dramatically as everyone grows confused. Then he drops the news. The train heading to the capital has exploded. The one carrying the Grand Duke's grandchildren. The room goes silent. He looks at them and says plainly, "They're all finished." The scene cuts to Karen regaining consciousness, his vision slowly clearing as he sees Hans standing over him. Hans asks if he's all right, and Karen casually responds that he's fine. While wrapping bandages around Leo, Hans asks for a quick status report. They inform him that 11 people are injured, 1 critically and 2 with minor wounds. The critically injured one is Dale, and 2 passengers from their carriage didn't survive. Karen notes that even Yura is reacting, which means the situation is worse than it looks. Karen asks where they are, and Hans tells him they're about 10 kilometers from the TB territory. He adds that he already contacted them earlier, so with Karen and the others awake, reinforcements should already be on the way. Hans then tells Karen that he and his squad will hold the line while Karen and Leo run as far as they can. He asks if Karen understands, but Karen is focused on his blade. It's reacting again, meaning the attackers are close. He glances toward the window and spots movement, feet just outside. He apologizes to Hans, saying running isn't an option. Hans asks why, and Karen answers coldly. These people attacked the Emperor's railway. That's treason. He's not about to run from trash like that. He turns to Leo and asks if he can still fight. Leo nods. Without hesitation, Karen slashes through the legs of one attacker outside the train. The man collapses, and Karen finishes his thought. There's only one choice. They eliminate every last one of them right here. Karen, Hans, and Leo step off the train. Karen scans the area and mutters that there are more enemies than he expected. The knights follow behind, forming up as tension fills the air. It's a full-on standoff. Hans notes that every one of them is at least 3-star level, and Karen agrees, pointing out that the one leading them is at least 6-star. The leader steps forward, his voice distorted by magic, and orders Karen to drop his weapon and surrender. He promises that if Karen cooperates, the knights and servants will be spared. Karen immediately understands their objective. They want him alive. He asks Hans if he realizes what that means. Hans hesitates, but Karen cuts him off. Of course he does. They can't kill him, but he can kill them. That's all he needs. Hans and Leo stare at him like he's lost his mind. Karen doesn't wait. He charges forward, cutting down an enemy instantly. The rest rush in, and the battlefield erupts into chaos as knights and assassins clash. Karen shouts that they need to break through to the back line and wipe them out all at once, but he notices the assassins hesitating. Confused, he wonders if he should make the first move instead. Some of the attackers complain that this wasn't part of the deal, but their leader orders them to stand down. He'll deal with Karen personally. Karen smirks, thinking it's about time, but before he can move, Hans steps in front of him, blocking his path. Caught off guard, Karen asks what he's doing. Hans warns him that this opponent is too dangerous and tells him to stay back. The leader mocks Hans, saying he's rushing toward his own death. Hans simply smirks and says they'll find out. Without wasting a second, he launches himself forward, leaping into the air. The assassin meets him head-on, and their clash sends sparks flying in every direction. But in the next instant, the assassin effortlessly deflects Hans' blade, sending him crashing to the ground. Hans hits hard and immediately realizes something is off. That deflection was too precise. As he stands, he analyzes the movements and comes to a conclusion. He knows exactly who this is. This 6-star opponent is Shahak, a knight of the Pabar Sultanate within the Empire. The problem is, the Empire and the Sultanate have a non-aggression pact. They're not supposed to be enemies. So why is someone like him targeting Karen? The Sultanate and the Ducal House have no conflict. But standing there won't give him answers. He'll have to force them out. Meanwhile, the fight continues, and surprisingly, the young masters are holding their ground. But Shahak isn't interested in distractions. He charges straight at Hans, forcing him onto the defensive and asking if he really has time to lose focus. Hans fires back, saying Shahak's formation has already collapsed. He unleashes his aura, blasting Shahak backward and resetting the flow of battle. He warns him that resistance is pointless and tells him to surrender while he still can. Shahak glances around, realizing his allies have been taken down. Hans tells him there's no need to die for nothing. If he surrenders now, he can at least live. But Shahak refuses, saying he has no interest in convincing someone who doesn't understand. He'll complete his mission no matter what. Then his eyes shift, black and red. Hans immediately recognizes it. Blood vessels bursting. As Shahak's aura distorts, Hans explains this is mana backlash. He has no intention of surviving. At this rate, capturing him is impossible, and worse, the young masters are now in serious danger. So Hans releases his own mana completely, preparing to endure whatever is coming. His eyes glow as he braces himself. Shahak charges in, and just as the clash is about to reach its peak, Karen's voice cuts in, calm, almost disappointed. He points out that he thought he came along to prevent trouble, but now Hans is the one causing chaos. Has he already given up on protecting them? Shahak turns in shock as Karen suddenly joins the fight. Karen doesn't hesitate. He charges forward and slices through Shahak's arm in one clean motion. The severed limb flies through the air. Shahak retreats immediately, calling Karen a monster. Karen shrugs it off, saying he'll take that as a compliment. Then his blade reacts again. He frowns, realizing there's still danger. He demands to know what Shahak is planning. Shahak calmly apologizes, confusing Karen. Then his mana surges wildly. Hans immediately understands what's about to happen. He shouts for everyone to protect Leo. Leo stands there, completely stunned, while the others rush to shield him. Hans tackles Karen to the ground, covering him. Karen demands to know what he's doing, and Hans shouts back. It's a self-destruction spell. This is happening because he underestimated the enemy. The mana spirals violently as Shahak's body begins to break apart. Then, explosion. Hans shields Karen with his own body. In that moment, Karen hears a voice in his head, calling him a fool. It says that since he allowed them to taste fresh night blood, they'll return the favor. It warns him to close his eyes unless he wants them to burst. When Karen regains awareness, he kicks Hans, telling him to stop lying there. Hans protests, saying he just protected him, asking where the gratitude is. Karen bluntly replies that he never asked to be saved. The voice speaks again, saying that without their help, things would have ended much worse. Karen pauses, confused, wondering where the voice is coming from. He looks down at his blade as it continues speaking, saying Shahak has likely been reduced to nothing. Karen stares at it in disbelief. The sword is talking, and it's talking a lot. To put it into perspective, the second explosion was far larger than the first. Later, as soldiers help each other out of the wreckage, Karen is still stuck on the talking sword situation. He recalls hearing stories about blacksmiths forging blades with souls, creating weapons that can speak. The sword immediately snaps back, threatening to cut his head off if he compares it to something like that again. Karen fires back, asking why it even bothered saving him if it's so easily offended. The blade calls him pathetic, saying if it hadn't used up its stored power protecting him, it would have already done exactly that. Another carriage approaches, and Hans prepares for more enemies, but Karen assures him it's not. The sword complains that it's completely drained and exhausted. Karen asks if it needs to kill enemies to recharge, and it casually suggests it could also draw energy from his blood. A knight steps out, introducing himself as Captain Hyrie of the TB Vigilante Corps. Karen casually remarks that if the sword really wants his blood, it's definitely a demonic weapon. The sword, clearly fed up, says it's going back into the scabbard and refuses to deal with him anymore. Karen doesn't mind, saying it should stay quiet anyway. Hyrie explains that the territory feels responsible and has been ordered to escort them safely. Karen nods, saying they have many injured and will rely on their help. As they ride in the carriage, Karen sits in the back, covered in blood. Hans asks if they should return to the fortress instead of continuing. The investigation is still ongoing, and there's no guarantee the danger is over. Karen says it's fine. They already contacted Zur, and he should be on his way. Besides, the Imperial Guard is likely moving as well. What matters more is the attacker. He asks Hans if he knows him. Hans confirms. He was a 6-star knight from the Pobar Sultanate named Shahak. Karen processes this, noting that the Sultanate lies beyond the desert to the east. If they're involved, it could mean the non-aggression pact is breaking down. Hans agrees relations have been worsening, but this kind of move is unusual. Karen points out that regardless, this alone could justify war. He asks Leo if he agrees. Leo says yes, but in truth, he wasn't even listening. His hands are trembling as he holds a blood-soaked uniform. He admits he can't stop shaking. Karen understands. It was Leo's first time killing someone. That's not something you get used to easily. But he tells him he has to overcome it, because that's what it means to survive. As they arrive, the mayor greets them, relieved they made it safely and promising full cooperation in the investigation. Karen cuts him off, saying he already knows they had nothing to do with the attack. And just like that, the next phase begins. Hans backs that up, telling the mayor, Gren, that he can relax. Then he adds that Gren seems quite different compared to his days as Minister of Finance. Gren grimaces, saying he'd rather not be reminded of that, and admits he regrets ever taking this position. He apologizes for rambling in front of noble guests, but Karen cuts him off, telling him to speak freely. He's not interested in stiff formalities from someone older than him. Gren hesitates, unsure how casual he's allowed to be with someone of ducal blood. Karen jokingly tells him to prove sincerity by kneeling, then immediately walks it back. Gren quickly agrees to just accept the kindness instead. Karen suggests they move somewhere more private to continue the discussion. Once settled, he pours Gren a glass of wine and begins laying out his theory. According to him, the attack wasn't carried out by regular forces, it was the work of smugglers. The attackers didn't rely on magic, but instead used explosives to destroy the railway. And those kinds of explosives can't easily be obtained through official military channels. Gren nods, confirming that's true. Karen continues, explaining that the Empire's armament procurement agency tightly controls its stockpiles, making theft nearly impossible. But if the explosives were smuggled in from outside the Empire, say, from the Sultanate, that would explain everything. Gren immediately understands where he's going with this. Only the Empire and the Sultanate are capable of producing explosives of that quality. Karen then asks the real question. Are merchants within the TB territory involved in this smuggling? Because if they are, that puts Gren in a very dangerous position. Gren is visibly impressed by how sharp Karen's reasoning is and admits that the possibility is high. Karen adds that if Gren denies it outright, he could easily end up being labeled an accomplice. With reckless smugglers running operations, it wouldn't take much for someone to become a scapegoat. Then Karen leans forward slightly and tells him to remember one thing. Gren asks nervously what that is. Karen says this incident has directly harmed the fortress and its knights. That's all it takes. Gren understands the implication immediately. He's being pulled into house arrest in Zorbit, a family known for repaying favors tenfold, but grudges 100-fold. If he doesn't cooperate, he's finished. Trying to shift the mood, Gren asks how Karen's father is doing. Karen raises an eyebrow, asking if he even knows him personally. Gren quickly claims they're practically like brothers. Karen smirks, saying that performance alone proves he's a politician. Gren wipes his sweat and replies that presentation is everything for people like him. At that moment, Gren's assistant rushes in, announcing that they've finally received word from the capital. Gren assumes it's about the Imperial Guard being dispatched, but the assistant shakes his head. It's more than that. The Commissioner of the National Tax Service himself is on the move, leading Special Division 1. Gren's face drains of color. That man is infamous, nicknamed the Demon King. His name is Commissioner Gale Furish. Gren stammers, asking if he's really coming here in person. Then he turns to Karen, asking if he already knew. Karen casually replies that his grandfather dotes on him, so of course he'd go all out to protect his grandson. In other words, the tax authority isn't coming to play games. Cut to another part of the TB territory. People are going about their day when they suddenly notice a massive force of armed soldiers marching through the streets. At the rear of the formation stands Gale himself. Bystanders whisper from alleyways, surprised at how quickly he arrived. Apparently, this situation involves family, and when family is involved, he wastes no time. Back at the mayor's office, the Merchant Guild representatives are in full panic mode. They're shouting, demanding to know why a sudden tax investigation has been launched and why it has to start immediately. Back in the hall, the merchants are completely losing it. Like, seriously, who dropped something like this on them out of nowhere? They needed time to cover up all their shady business. At the very least, their puppet mayor should have stalled things long enough for them to clean house. And to make it worse, it's Special Division 1 handling the audit, the absolute worst-case scenario. Grin just sits there, thinking, these idiots still don't understand how doomed they are, even after everything he's done to shield them. That's when Karen steps forward and drops the truth. He reminds them this isn't some small offense. They destroyed Imperial Railway tracks, attacked the grandson of Duke Reston along with Fortress personnel, and used smuggled explosives, most likely funneled through their own merchant guild. So yeah, there's a very good reason the Emperor's personal tax enforcers are knocking right now. The merchants finally realize they're finished. One of them tries to recover, saying he just meant they should have been given time to prepare properly. Karen asks for his name, and the guy actually answers, Viscount Humorer of the Humor Merchant Guild. Karen smiles. Good. I'll make sure to mention you by name to my grandfather. You know, the Commissioner of the National Tax Service. The guy instantly turns pale, scrambling to take it back. But it's already too late. The door swings open, and Special Division 1 walks in. The room goes silent as Gale announces that starting now, a full audit of all merchant guilds will begin. They've received reports of smuggling, tax evasion, and illegal wealth accumulation, and the Emperor himself ordered this investigation. Karen just watches, thinking his grandfather looks way better in a military uniform than in some boring civil servant clothes. Off to the side, Leo quietly asks Hans if Division 1 is really that terrifying. Hans explains they deal with the biggest targets, major guilds and noble houses, and they even have the authority to mobilize the Imperial Guard. Basically, they're the fantasy world's IRS. Leo nods slowly. So, if you don't pay taxes, you get destroyed. While they're talking, Gale approaches Karen. It's been 3 years. He asks how he's been. Karen respectfully says he's doing well and is glad to see him. Gale checks if he needs medical attention, but Karen insists he's fine. Then Gale gets straight to it. Does Karen have any suspects? Karen says no. If his uncles were behind this, there'd be no evidence. But whoever planned this attack left clues everywhere, almost like they wanted it to look like the PAB Sultanate. It's too obvious. Gale pats his head, saying he knows Karen wants to hunt them down himself. But as his grandfather, he's against it. Not because he doubts him, but because the world is dangerous, and there are still enemies nearby. It's better to stay put and head to the capital tomorrow as ordered. The adults will handle everything. Karen smiles and agrees. But Gale immediately sees through it. Karen's eyes are glowing with aura, and that grin says everything. In his mind, Gale already knows, this kid is absolutely not staying put. Cut to a merchant's residence. The man is panicking, rushing to load everything onto carriages. He sends his family away first, telling them he'll follow soon. Once they leave, he notices someone watching from the rooftops. He mutters about being tailed, no room for mistakes. Meanwhile, back at Karen's place, he's up late polishing guillotine. Zur walks in, asking if he's planning to cause trouble again. Karen fires back, asking if he came just to lecture him. Zur explains he's there with orders from the head of the house. The moment Karen gets the chance, he's to find the culprits and make them pay, with blood, for every life lost. Karen laughs. That was already his plan. Later that night, Karen and Leo head into the city. They're heading for the black market to meet an informant. Leo complains about having to play the servant, but Karen says his haircut makes it believable, and 2 noble kids wandering alone would look suspicious. In a dark alley, a man approaches. Karen reaches for his sword, but the guy quickly says Zur sent him. His name is Julio, and he leads them to a carriage with soundproofing artifacts so they can talk safely. Karen gets straight to the point. Julio confirms only 2 groups deal in black market explosives, Karua and Kigo. Karua recently pulled out. Kigo, on the other hand, is made up of former slaves who'll do anything for money, and they left the city around the time of the attack. That's suspicious enough. They head to Kigo's hideout, but guards block their way, saying no clients are allowed today. Tension rises. Karen provokes them, and when they reach for their weapons, he strikes first. Leo follows, realizing there was never a second plan. Karen just made it up. They take the guards down quickly. Then a woman's voice stops everything. She tells them to stand down. Karen realizes she's the leader. She invites them inside, even though she clearly knows who they are. Karen keeps the guards as hostages, just in case. Inside, things escalate fast. Karen suddenly grabs a masked boy as a hostage, only to realize the insane aura behind him belongs to an 8-star knight. That's when it clicks. The kid is the 6th prince. Things get chaotic, but eventually calm down when Pina, the elf president, arrives. She explains they didn't carry out the attack. They deal in explosives, yes, but for research, not terrorism. And whoever did this isn't Karua either. They're not capable of something this big. She offers Karen information on the real culprit, but with one condition. He has to become friends with the 6th prince. Karen immediately sees the problem. Getting involved with the imperial family is politically dangerous, but Leo argues it could actually benefit them. The prince himself casually admits he just wants to mess with his father. Karen calls him insane. Still, he listens. Later, using the intel, Karen tracks down the real culprit, Alm. The man is trying to flee, thinking everything would have worked if Karen had died. Karen confronts him, breaks him mentally, and has him arrested. He spares the man's family, but makes it clear Alm will suffer for his crimes. Back at the mayor's office, Karen proposes going public with everything. The attack, the investigation, all of it. It's a risky move, but it works. The mayor gives a powerful speech, exposing the corruption and rallying the people. The city erupts. The corrupt council is finished. Even back at the Rest-Stun mansion, Halo is impressed. Karen didn't just get revenge. He reshaped the political landscape in one move.